Thank you, Leslie and Omar, for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be here, even though I'm a little bit exhausted. I taught 2 classes today, and I came from Providence. But I see you here, and I hope everything will be fine. Just give me 2 minutes to reorient myself. So, and thank you, Omar, for the generous presentation. And you ended with potential history. So what I'm going to present this evening is part of a manuscript on which I worked in the last 10 years called Potential History, Unlearning Imperialism. And now when I listen to Omar quoting from this quite old paper from, I don't remember when, a few years ago, Potential History in Relation to Palestine. What I did when I migrated to the US 5-6 years ago is Palestine became one component of an attempt to unlearn imperialism. And I think that I would revise, and I think that this is what I'm doing in this manuscript, the definition of potential history in order to think about other, formations, imperial formations that we have to suspend when we are trying to think. So what I'm going to present tonight is an attempt to think about different narrative of modern art. I was formed or shaped by discourses on art, of art, about art. Some of them were undone, since then when I was shaped through these discourses. But I think that there is still a lot to do, and I can even compare it to, when they are generating, nuclear energy. There is always the question what to do with it later on, how to decommission it. And what we have in museums is something that should be decommissioned in so many ways. And unfortunately, I didn't see yet, Black Panther. I'm pretty sure that most of you have seen it. So just I would say that maybe my entire lecture can be condensed to one, shot in the film that I only read about it. When one of the protagonists is coming and taking, the sword from an imagined British museum. I don't know if he puts it in the right place, but I didn't see the film, as I said. But I think that much of what I'm going to tell you tonight is maybe emblematized in this scene that, again, I didn't see. But I think that, the more we imagine actions, not only theories, not only narratives, and the more we produce narratives and theories, how to unlearn imperialism and how to think about these objects that were plundered and that are all over museums that we, many of us like to go there, were shaped by the love to these objects. So I think that the more we will explore these objects in relation to other narratives, maybe the better the future would be. So let me start with telling you how I came to study the case of Congo, which is a part of this project. Renzo Martins invited me. He has already 10 years, I think, project in Congo that he's doing with 2 unions, artist unions in Congo, Cercle d'Art des Travailleurs des Plantations Congolaises, and the other one is Institute of Human Activities. And they invited me to participate in what Renzo Martins calls reverse gentrification, which is an attempt to think about art not as continued to be plundered from different places and nurturing the West, but how gentrification can be reversed. So this invitation was, for me, an opportunity to think, another opportunity, I would say, to think beyond Palestine about the same questions that I ask in relation to Palestine, and to understand plunder as a more a comprehensive project of imperialism. And to go back to things that I didn't do in the last couple of years, to go back to my work as a curator, to my work invested in art. I was curator of an alternative space for several years, and I stopped working in the art world in the last, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years. And this was an opportunity for me to go back to some of the skills and some of the training and some of the background, and to ask many questions that I didn't ask in relation to art, because what I did in the last years, what I did since I stopped working in the art world was mostly in photography. So I will not talk about Renzo Martin's project. I just wanted to give it as one of the point of entry for me to explore Congo, and to explore Congo in terms of in relation to art objects. And I am not an expert of art from Congo, and I refuse to be an expert of art from Congo or from any other place. What I'm trying to do is to undo some of our practices, skills, and forms of handling objects that are plundered, as we do it in relation to many other objects. And the position of expertise that I am rejecting is a position that I am also, studying as a position that should be undone, and it's part of the narrative that I'm proposing. So let me give you another aspect of the broader context before I start my lecture. Studying these objects that were plundered from many different places, we cannot avoid the notion of expedition. Expedition as part of anthropology, expedition as part of the way that museums, the growth of museums, expedition as part of political and military, apparatuses, and the context that I am trying to think about in a non-expertise way about objects that were plundered from different places, mainly from Palestine and Congo, is as a kind of counter-expedition. And this notion of counter-expedition is an attempt to understand this split that is at the heart of the imperial project between objects that are becoming precious objects, that are becoming art objects, and people. Because when objects are plundered, there are people who are left objectless, or are left worldless, or are left in different, positions. And what we see today, and it's not new, whoever speak about a crisis in relation to refugees just lying to us, it's not a crisis. It's an ongoing, project, I would say, of trying to reverse some of the injustices of imperialism. And when I'm speaking about counter expedition, I am speaking about the possibility to associate or to link together the movement of migrants or the movement of asylum seekers to Europe from Africa, from Asia, from other places, to link it together to the objects that are already here. So what I'm trying to think when I'm proposing a different narrative of the origin of modern art is not only to undo the hegemonic narratives of art, but it's also to provide a different cartography, let's say, of how we can imagine a different civil contract or a different future that will allow to bring to a closure many of the injustices of imperialism, and to imagine it through objects, because objects were treated much better than people throughout these 500 years. So this kind of few centuries of taking care of objects and doing to them all these things that I'm going to present is an opportunity to think about the documented objects in continuity with what imperialism still generates as undocumented people. So to bring together documented objects and undocumented people. So counter-expedition is a way to reverse this split between objects and people. So here is an image that was taken in the mid-30s, sculptures for the exhibition African Negro Art displayed for customs inspection before installation. So here we have, part of these kind of euphemisms. We have the objects are in order. They are legalized. Because you see there will be inspection and everything will be fine, everything will get the right stamp, and they will be displayed to the public with no signs of crimes on them. And they are, of course, also labeled. What I tried to do to blow up a little bit a photograph that was not in optimal resolution, but you see the labels with which they are already treated. And I think that when we look at this image that is on the one hand very, nice and attractive, what I'm asking you is to look at it as an image of violence rather than as an image that is appealing on so many other, ways. And it's an image of violence, and we have to ask questions not only in relation to the objects, but also in relation to the people that were detached from these objects. So we can ask, first of all, why these objects are so clean? And then we can ask why they are alone. Where are the people among whom they were generated, they were circulated, et cetera, et cetera? So there are many questions about this kind of assembly, forced assembly of objects that we can and should ask. So let me quote from a book that is doing halfway to account for the scramble for Africa, but somehow is completely horrified. The authors of this book are completely horrified, actually, from what they are doing. So there is a kind of complete denial in the entire book, even though what they are providing us is, I would say, with the case to go to court. If we would like to see court as the addressee, I don't want. So what I'm trying to do is to do other things with it. So let me quote. African objects had been displayed as curious in the homes of the wealthy for centuries. They first began to go on public display in Western museum settings at the end of the 19th century. Not coincidentally, just when these collections discussed in this book were made, and the collections that are discussed in this book, in the book that they wrote, The Scramble for Art in Central Africa, are the collection of Frobenius and Tardet and all the others. We will come back to them later on. So let me continue with the two editors of this collection who wrote the introduction. Sorry, I forgot to say a few things about the quotation that I wrote here. So what interests me in this quotation is this kind of blindness to what they are saying. They are saying that they were displayed at homes as curious, and then they began to go on public display in Western museums when these objects were collected, as if Western museums were always there. And these objects that were first in private collections went to the museums that waited for them. And what I will propose as a narrative is the other way around, that these museums were created as a consequence of this plunder. But let me go a little bit slowly. It is mainly in the past 20 years, their book was published in 1998, so we're speaking about the 70s, that our categories have begun to shift and the rigid distinctions between art and craft and art and anthropology are being reevaluated. These rigid distinctions, where are they coming from? What made them so rigid? So now we will get some explanation. We have come full circle to a broad interest in all different kinds of material culture as forms of aesthetic expression, in a sense of returning to the perspectives and interests of late 19th century travelers. They are called travelers. All these people that were involved and invested in plundering, they are called traveler. And when they are writing this book, The Scramble for Art in Africa, that, as I said, they are going halfway, but they are returning back, as if they are going to account for the scramble for art. in parallel, of course, with the Scramble for Africa, the Congo-Berlin conference from the late 19th century. But rather than doing this work of accounting for the plunder, they are reconciling with the plunderer, with the collectors, with those, leaders of expeditions. Somehow, as Reconstruction era in the US, rather than, looking for ways to reconcile with those who were made slave, the Reconstruction led at the end for the reconciliation between South and North, which is for imperial enterprise to continue, not to be brought into a closure. This kind of displacement of the right reconciliation is part of it. Like Schweinfurth, and excuse me for the distortion of all the names, like Schweinfurth, Juncker, and Casati, we look at shields, hats, pots, and other non-figurative objects as beautiful. But having non-acknowledged the existence of artists in Africa, these non-figurative objects also begin to be perceived as works of art as we reevaluate our classification of objects, our definitions of art and artifact, and think further about African approaches to the questions. So the we deserves attention. The we is mainly non-African that are Africanist. Non-African Africanists that are studying these objects with a kind of very complex relationship that I will not dwell on it today. But what interests me here is also the way that every once in a while there is an attempt to recognize objects that were plundered as art. So you will see it, in the exhibition that I showed you the image before the display in the MoMA in the 30s. Here we're speaking about the 70s. They are relating to the 70s. And it's go on and on and on and on. Every once in a while, there is an effort to recognize that Africans know how to do art, as if it should surprise someone. But what I'm interested in is first of all, in this kind of recurrence gesture, and second, in the way that this recognition is in itself an act of violence, because it is recognizing African art as being part of one idea of transcendental concept of art, but I will arrive to it later. So what we see here is works from 72 art collections in Europe and the US. There is no provenance, of course. These works are coming to the museum, to the display. They are already coming from these collections that each of them was enriched by these objects. Let me skip this one. And this is a quotation from a film by Chris Marker and Alain René, Statues Also Die. When men die, they enter history. When statues die, they enter art. This botany of death is what we call culture. And I think that I'm already will be late to do what I want to do, so I wanted to screen 2-3 minutes from the film, but I will skip it. And let me just dwell for a second on the euphemism that we have here. And the euphemism is that statues also die. And this is a euphemism because we are speaking about an act of murder, not about, natural death when they became old. And also the narrative of the film is about detaching the sculpture from their context. And when we are looking at these sculptures, we are missing so much in order to understand. But if we would be provided with more, if sculpture will not die in the museum, we may have a better experience of this art. And this is a quotation from an exhibition that was shown not so long ago, in 2012, 2013, during the first decades of the 20th century, the appreciation of African artifacts in the West shifted dramatically. From colonial trophies and ethnographic specimens, they became modernist icons worthy of aesthetic contemplation. So here you see, with Chris Marker and Alain René, we add art as a shrine into which objects enter, and here we understand that entering into art is a kind of elevation of objects, as if, the way that objects were lived among different communities in non-Western and Western environments, as if this was not the right ontological, I would say, status of these objects. Well established in the role played in this radical transformation by modern European artists such as Pablo Picasso, André Derain, and Henri Matisse, who found a source of inspiration in the bold shapes of African art and began collecting it around 1905. So what we have here is just, the beginning of our beginning of what I will show a little bit in length, how, this art again is discovered by artists who give it the right stamp, who define that this is truly art. So what we have here is a transcendental category of art, that art is, and I will say shortly what art is, and then we have an aesthetic judgment that is already embedded in the institution of art, that once an object enters the institution, enters the museum, it is immediately elevated into one manifestation of this transcendental category of art. And if you will, just look a little bit at the history of how these, histories of art were shaped, you had a modern sculpture where there is an account of all these artists, Derain, Pablo Picasso, etc., as they were discovering African art, but it has nothing to do with the history of modern sculpture. And then you have the story of African art, and the relationship are like in the museum. African art is like, what you have in the basement, that you are inspired by, you discover it, etc., and then there is the hegemonic narrative. But what I'm going to propose is nothing of, the inclusion of African art into this transcendental category of art. On the contrary, what I would like to do is to undo this transcendental category of art that gave, birth to these kind of narratives in which objects could be ordered, documented objects could be ordered outside of the community where they were produced. So let me go back to those Came and Schilkenkraut who wrote this book, Scramble for Art in Africa. However, the history of collecting, like that of representation, is complicated and cannot easily be summed up using words like pillage, appropriation, or commodification. As valid as these descriptors may be in certain situations, the transactions were often complicated and multifaceted. And I'm not denying that, plundering so much, we are speaking about very complicated, transactions, but this is no reason in order to give up on these terms of pillage, plundering, etc., and dedicate the entire book to the history of collecting, as if collecting was not an act of, as if collecting under the imperial violence condition and different formations of expropriation was not plunder. So what they are doing, this is the only place in their book when they are mentioning the notion of plunder in order to reject it as soon. So rather than this transcendental category of art that enables to judge what is art and what is not art, as if we need this kind of orthodoxy that will mediate for us, I propose the other way around. I'm saying that plundering objects into art, this practice that was part of 500 years of plundering other cultures and expropriating them from what they had. And I do not start this story only in the 19th century with these expeditions. The plundering and the expropriation was part of enslavement, part of all the other outrageous projects of which imperialism consists. So plundering objects into art, through this this art became a transcendental category. And why do I say that? Because what does it mean, plundering objects into art? It means that you are taking several, products, several objects from various contexts. You detach them from everything that is attached to them, and now they have a different life from the people among whom they lived. And these detached objects now are the object of an entire discipline that is in formation in the same time that objects are plundered, and this discipline called art and modern art, that they are, I'm not going to repeat the hegemonic narratives of the emergence of modern art. Some would situate it, with the Renaissance. Other would, as if, the world was Renaissance at the time when people were enslaved and plundered, etc. But some would situate it in the Renaissance. Other would situate it, with Impressionism or Post-Impressionism. Other would situate it, in other contexts. But not plunder would be understood as the origin of modern art, as the origin of what enabled to classify objects in a kind of white boxes and to say this is modern, this is not modern. This belongs to Africa, but this is authentic and this is not authentic. So hence we have to dump it. Hence we have to put it on the wall, etc., etc. But I will show it slowly through other images if I didn't already exhausted my time. No. So rather than thinking about the museum's authority or museum power to baptize objects as art, to transform African objects into, and I'm quoting from the Metropolitan exhibition that I quoted earlier, modernist icons worthy of aesthetic contemplation, the plunder of objects and plundered objects, this is what endow the museum with the power and with the authority to determine the meaning and the fate of others' objects. Just to give you an example, Cincinnati Art Museum, one of many, one of really dozens of museums that proliferate in the turn of the century, from 19th century to the 20th century. And what you have here, just let me read from their website. In 1889, 3 years after opening its doors, the Cincinnati Art Museum exhibited Carl Steckelmann's extensive collection of African art and ethnographic material, etc. So it is not that museums, what we call Western museums, were there and slowly they acquired objects into their collection. The invasion, I would say, of objects plundered from Africa and Asia enabled the proliferation of museums and the proliferation of this scheme of taxonomy of objects of art. So art, from a polysemous set of practices endemic to the rituals, habits, and needs of various communities, became art as a unified activity whose products are exchangeable objects, destined to be interpreted and cared for by experts according to allegedly neutral procedures that have been made into the transcendental condition of art. So this detachment of objects from their context, rather than thinking about it, in a melancholic way, that what we lost in the way, what I'm trying to do is to understand this detachment as creating the condition under which the practices of handling situation of violence can be understood and perceived by the practitioners as completely neutral, and the objects as precious objects that should be salvaged, that should be really get the best conditions. So this detachment of the objects from the set of practices that now I will dwell on enable the plunder of these objects to be so massive, and us, art lovers, art scholars, art curators, whatever, to experience art without having the understanding that what we are experiencing is actually our socialization into complicity with practices of violence against many people. So let's start with discovering, rendering objects precious objects. So Picasso, Picasso attributed his Cubist period to the influence of African masks that he found in the chaotic collections and the shabby rooms of the old Trocadero Museum. So listen to something that you're probably very familiar with till today. Discovering something in a chaotic, right? You will have the best eye to single out the most precious objects out of the chaotic and the shabby rooms. So this is Picasso discovering African art. Of course, in this kind of description, we are even not being told that all that is collected in the rooms of the Trocadero was, if you read, Larisse's diaries from this period, was plundered from many places and was dumped there in order for the lavish modern art to emerge on the walls of the gallery. And just let me give you another glance into this practice of discovery. This is by Leon Kuczynski, art historian, a Belgian art historian in the 50s. And just to mention, to remind ourselves how much, the plunder of Congo was not only the plunder of objects, but was, of course, involved the massacre of 9 million people as part of the enrichment of Belgium. One evening, about 1904, Maurice de Vlamignac, the famous fauve painter, had a drink in a certain Parisian bistro. Suddenly, on the shelves of the counter, he noticed 2 African fetishes. He found them to his liking, bought them for a small sum, and took them to his studio. The next day, he showed them to his fellow artists, and they all agreed that it was a wonderful purchase. So you have everything here, right? Everything of the best eye of the connoisseur suddenly, and he noticed, and for a small sum, because the others didn't know what exactly they have, but he knew the real value, etc., etc. And they all agreed, of course. The agreement is necessary in order for the violence to be, experienced by others as non-violence. So discovering, let me move to labeling, and just, situate the project of labeling objects, of documenting objects that were plundered in the larger context of the West, imposing its taxonomies on each and every place that was plundered, not only in terms of art. I'm focusing mainly on art. Linnaeus, the big taxonomer. Generic names that do not have a root derived from Greek or Latin are to be rejected. And the names used by the elders, which is, of course, part of imperialism, is to disrupt knowledge that is transmitted from generation to generation, because this is, of course, would be the knowledge that will enable a more powerful, I would say, resistance. So the names used by the elders, which are 45 centimeters long and which are descriptions rather than definitions, must be abhorrent. So the labeling, I've already talked about the labeling, and just when we are looking at these images, we should always, when we are looking at these objects very well labeled, we have always to imagine, because we are not provided with this imagery, certainly not when we are going back, in time, with images from where they were plundered and what was left after they were plundered. So just, a short glimpse to Congo before and after, the landscape before and after, railway were posed there. Everything was raised in order to make room for the industrialization of Congo. And then let's move to the cleansing of the walls, which is, very close to this notion that we have of the white cube. And we have to see it in relation to the plunder. So what you would see here in this kind of recurrent, as I said earlier, the recurrent gesture of recognizing that there is art in Africa, what you would see is part of the transformation of the way that the objects were shaped and reshaped and reshaped and reshaped as art. So here the story would speak about, they are amassed in one room. We are speaking about 1819 in the exhibition from the Congo Basin in London. Here, these are the rooms of the Musée de Trocadero, in which Picasso was the only one who was able to take something out of this mass of objects. And here you would already see, Stieglitz in 1940 showing the African savages in his gallery in New York. And here you can see how he juxtaposes under this taxonomy of the transcendental category of art, images from Picasso and Braque and African savages objects. So cleansing walls and objects also. Here I'm following, the research by Zoe Strother that studied the way that Karl Eisenstein, who is another inventor of African art. There are so many inventors of African art. Each and every scholar at the time was able to make himself into Africanist or into scholar or specialist or expert of African art. From here, of course, you understand is the resistance. And what she did when she studied, is epos of African art, negroplastic. She reconstructed the way that not only the walls had to be cleansed in order to host these objects, but the objects themselves had to be cleansed in order for us, audience of art, to see the right thing, to see the important art objects without all the superfluous elements that were, by people who are savages, who put this on the objects as if they don't understand what is the right object. It's only Picasso who can single out the right object. So what you see here is that all the textile, all the nails, everything was removed in order to obtain the proper art object without what is considered to be superfluous. Of course, without the people that are involved in the production of these art. And this is a double spread from Karl Eisenstein, from Black Sculpture. And here, just let me dwell for a second on Walker Evans, that even if he didn't consider himself as, the inventor of African art, there were others who were able to do it for him later on. So here you would see a way that typically, according to the Metropolitan, art objects were taken in photographs, with these kind of superfluous shadows on the wall, and you would see the way that Walker Evans was able really to capture the object without everything else. The revolutionary way that Walker Evans chose to portray African artworks with their own visual power and the history of representation is indeed an insight into his legendary practice of framing and cropping. So baptizing objects as art. This is installation views from Brooklyn Museum from 23. The entire collection, whatever may have been its original uses, is shown under the classification of art. So here is the responsible and moral and art connoisseur subject who is giving African art its right status, which means elevating it from where it was earlier by previous scholars, and there is an opportunity for another discoverer to reassess that this is art. I think that I will skip some of it in order to move to classifying, cataloging as if the object is always already detached. Just briefly, the image on the left is coming from French Congo, while other objects are coming from Belgian Congo, because, under imperialism, the world was cut with scissors, everybody got his share. And from French Congo, what we have as drawing that are documenting the local practices is, of course, a kind of short exposure to the fact that these objects had different, values, meanings, uses, etc., etc. But these had to be rejected in order to salvage the right object. And here they are functioning as guardian figures. Here is another example, and what I'm interested in is the way that there is an acknowledgement of the violation on different levels, not only on the level of the direct plunder. There is an acknowledgement of the violation, but there is a kind of continuation of the use of this violation. So this is from Sousberger on Bapende's sculpture. This is from a converted village near the Kitangua mission. The chief woman holds the axe in her right hand. At the neck, the shefal collar with the leopard's tooth. The left hand, we're speaking about this hand, holding the cup was almost intentionally broken, almost everywhere, to avoid explanations. So what we have here is the resistance of the local community to disclose what is the meaning of this object. So not only there is an acknowledgement on behalf of, those who are studying these objects, that there is a resistance, that they will go farther with exploring these objects. There is also sharing this information as if, wow, we succeeded nonetheless to gather the right information, of course, through informants, etc. But I will probably not have time to dwell on it. Or this is another example, and let me just briefly show two examples from 66, from Paris Match in relation to the Dakar presentation of art. Until today, women who see these fetishes were punished with death. So if this is true, why it is there? The same is here. This photo is a tour de force. No one has the right to see the dancer while he takes off the mask. And here what we have is the tour de force of the photographer taking what is not allowed to take, not allowed to take by ISLO, Paris Match, France, the motherland that just, agreed to withdraw from there, but is not allowed to do it if the object is not treated as standing for itself, detached from the community. So we are speaking about collecting, we are speaking about detaching, expropriating, cataloging, exhibiting, displaying, restricting and denying access to objects through museal preservation. So we are speaking about so many, of the practices that are...
Okay, check it out.
The bread and butter of the practice, of the curatorial practice or the art practice, and of course granting experts privileged access to an authority over now art objects. I know that I'm... You're fine. So now what I wanted to do is two things. I don't think that, even though generously you told me that I'm fine, I don't think that I will keep you more. I'll come back to some of it, when we will have Q&A. I wanted to show an excerpt of a film. This I will do 2-3 minutes. A film by Ousmane Sembène, shot in Senegal, where you would see a mask, and you would see what's going on with the mask. You won't see the entire film, so you cannot understand the role that it plays in the entire film, but I will dwell on the different images that I brought, because what I would like to show with this mask in the film is the way that the mask, every time when it is seen in the film, it organizes the relationship between the protagonists in different ways, which means that the mask only once, when it is held by the white couple and when it is put on the wall, only once this withdrawal of the mask is the beginning of what we will see at the end, that the Senegalese woman will commit suicide because she was actually tortured in decolonized France. And in all the other manifestation of the mask in the film, what is interesting to see is that the mask does not have a value in itself. The mask is what enables the people who exchange it between them to agree through the mediation of the mask on the formation of their relationship. So I will show you the extract from the film. I'll show this. I'll dwell very shortly on a few images from the film, and then what I wanted to do is, after all this, presentation, to say something about other options to think about art, which is not under this transcendental category of art, but this will probably wait for another day, or maybe to the Q&A. So let me show. What do we do in order to have sound? He's not there, I think. Okay, so let me show you for a minute few of the images until maybe there will be sound. So the film starts with Osman Semben himself, on the left side, the director, acting as the public writer, and the young boy is sitting there and is telling him, throw the mask, don't be preoccupied with the mask, and he's doing that. So there is a kind of, giving order and accepting the order, accepting what is said in relation to the mask and through the mediation of the mask. He tells him, put it down. And then the protagonist of the film is coming. She wants to have the mask because she wants to have a job in the house of the white couple that is living in Senegal. So she asks him, give me the mask. And she proposes a certain kind of exchange relationship. And she takes the mask, and the boy is not happy with that. So he's running after her. So what we see is all the time how the mask operates in between people and shape what's going on among them. And here she meets a woman in the street. This is the scene that I wanted to start to show you. And she tells her, I got a job, I got a job, I got a job. And she's extremely happy. And she arrives to the place where her mother is. And the boy is after her. And her mother, who hears that she's going to have a job with the white guys, she's not happy at all, and she throws away the mask, and she tells her, watch out yourself, because it's not going to be happy. And here she arrives to their home, and she offers the mask as a present to the white woman, who will really torture her toward from the mid-film till the end. And the husband is coming home, and he's taking the mask in his hand, and he's saying in French, in English they translated it, looks like the real thing. He's saying, wow, c'est authentique, it's authentic, which is part of, the mechanism of saying that art that was produced in Africa after the big expeditions of plundering of the art that was produced later is not the real thing, is not authentic, is tourist art, etc., which was part of the effort to cut the infrastructure of art in Africa in order to make those objects that were plundered into rare objects that deserve their place in museums. So he puts it on the wall, and then when she feels like enough is enough, she takes the mask, even though she gave it, because the mask that she gave was part of a certain contract among her and her employer, so she takes it back. And the woman is unhappy with her taking it back, and here you see a kind of very powerful scene when they are struggling over the mask, and the black girl takes it, Duana takes it, and she's the only one who is named. The couple is not named. This is part of Semben, way to reverse, to do maybe a kind of counter expedition. And at the end, she commits suicide. He's going back. Here you see him going back to Senegal, willing to bring back her salary that they didn't give her to eat when she was there, and her belongings. And the child take the masks, and he's running after the man, and the man is really horrified by the mask running after him, which means it's not only, the mask, it's not only the child, it is this kind of relationship that is established through the mediation of the mask. Can we try the film? No. Okay. Thank you.